As you can tell from the title, recently we ran a playtest for a new game that we're working on. And this is part of our strategy of not cancelling any games in 2026, where we want to basically spend less time between starting development on a game and then getting actual external validation. So we're working on an incremental game, MMO98, and we've been working on it for, at this point, 4.5 weeks, with last week we did our first playtest. And overall, that playtest went pretty okay, I would say. It wasn't honestly horrible, but it also, you know, there's always room for improvement. So in this video, I kind of just want to talk you through like how the experience was for us, what did we learn from it, and then like what are like my top 3 tips or like regrets for having done this playtest and how are we going to move onward. So maybe more of just a reporting of what it's like to develop games again, and not just top 10 tips to run playtests, but also just why it was for us. So let's take a little bit of a step back first and talk about the game that we're actually making, just so you have a little bit more context, because we haven't been pushing this that much yet on this channel. So the game we're making is MMO98, and it's an incremental game where you run the infrastructure part of an MMO game studio back in the like early 2000s, late 90s. Similarly to kind of like Blizzard and things like that. It also draws some inspiration from my previous job, because before I became a full-time game developer, I was actually a data center architect at Cisco, where I designed like data centers basically. Not like 100% related to gaming all of the time, but still it was a concept that I really liked. I also liked how games like Execute, like those styles of incremental games, did the fake Windows 98 style operating system, so that's what we ended up going with as well, where we have a very UI-driven game basically. Most of it is UI at the end of the day, but using that Windows 98 like style that seems to be maybe picking up some steam over on Steam. I don't know. It feels like the more I look around now, the more that I notice that there are other games that use this style as well that are seemingly pretty well received. So the goal is that you basically expand your infrastructure so you can handle more players, which in return then gives you more money, which you can then reinvest basically. It's an incremental game. Numbers go up, you make money, and then you make even more money the further you progress. You have a prestige system where you can reset, which is basically releasing a new game. And we thought this idea was pretty good. We've been working on this, like I said, for about 4 weeks. And whilst we knew, okay, this is maybe a decent idea, we didn't know if other people would really like it. And that's why from day one, basically, our first goal when we started development on that first almost like prototype basically was to get a playtest out as soon as possible. And I'm happy to announce that we kind of succeeded in that as well, where we wanted to test how is the gameplay loop up until that first prestige. That was kind of what we determined as the scope for our first playtest, figuring out what does the first 10-15 minutes of this game look like and what do people like and not like about this game. With the big question that we wanted to get answered from the playtest as well being like, okay, this game idea is good and we should keep working on it, or this game idea maybe can work but we need to do some pivoting because people don't really like one of the core design pillars, for example, or it's just like, yeah, this was actually just a bad idea, my dude, and you should just cancel it. And like I said, I'm pretty happy to announce that the general consensus, I would say, so far has been, okay, whilst there are some issues, definitely, we can keep going with this. We weren't working on something that nobody ever asked for, basically. We were working on a game that seems to have a pretty good amount of feedback of like people liking it. When also like the people who played it gave us a feedback like, hey, this may be one of the best games that you guys have ever made. There is going to be some bias in this, I think, as well, because our playtesting audience right now, for the most part, has been you guys, our viewers, who innately might be a bit more biased to liking a game about game development, somewhat related at least, because you are game developers as well. Those are things that we are aware of as well, of like there may still be a bias, but that is kind of the good news already. So how did we run our playtest? That's maybe an interesting one as well. So, okay, we knew kind of what is the scope that we want of our game, so what are all the mechanics we wanted, and we started working on that. And we first planned on releasing this playtest in 1 week after development started. Turns out making an incremental game has a lot of systems underneath, so making a good first playtest version still requires you to build a pretty solid foundation. So it ended up taking us 3.5 weeks to get to that playtest point, which was way longer than we expected. But once we got to that point, we were like, okay, we feel confident in that first 10-15 minutes of like, you can try it out. We know that there are still big problems with like balancing and all of that, and it's kind of, you know, overloading because we don't have a very in-depth tutorial of that. We knew that, but we also knew like, hey, like I said, we need to get feedback as fast as possible. So what we did, and this is luckily, well, for us at least, a benefit, is we just went live basically. We did a live stream and it was like titled like we need you to come help playtest our incremental game. Because our live streams in general pull in about, I would say, 100 viewers, or a little bit more maybe lately, in terms of our audience. And a lot of them also want to try out the game then. So then I just walked through the game like as well. Like I talked a bit about our development, we live streamed us playing it, and then we asked people to go and play the game themselves. We had an itch.io page where they could either download the game or play a web version of the game and then give us feedback in our Discord server. In terms of actual stats, we got 75 downloads of the like playtest exe and about 470 browser plays. I don't know how itch.io exactly tracks browser plays, if that means that like one person has played the game 10 times, does that count as 1 or 10 browser plays? I don't know, but I think it's still a decent sample size, and it's kind of also on purpose for us. We didn't really yell everywhere we could about the fact that we were running a playtest for this game because we knew inherently we have a little bit of an audience in our advantage where like we can guarantee some viewers. There's actually a video I made a while back of like, hey, here's why you should do game dev YouTube, and you don't need to have 50,000 subscribers to get this kind of, you know, playtester feedback already. But I think it is a very good benefit of having even just a smaller-ish YouTube channel, because you have that audience of people that you can get that first feedback from already. There's other ways you could have done it as well. Like, you know, we could have just put the build more public on itch.io. We kept it unlisted for us. You could go to other Discord servers. You could go to Reddit, for example, to announce your playtest and all of that. We didn't really need to do that, luckily. One other reason why we kept this kind of low-key to a certain degree is because from previous playtests, we also realized we're going to get enough feedback, where we've done playtests before and there is like a certain maximum amount of like data you can get before it just becomes too much. We've done playtests before where we got more feedback, yeah, but there's like very much diminishing returns here, where like after you've heard 30 or 20 people give their feedback, you kind of know everything. And yeah, sure, you get more feedback, but after our like first weekend, it was like people gave us their feedback. It's like, yeah, we already knew this. You're not telling us anything new here because the other 15 people also gave us the exact same feedback. And I'm grateful for their feedback still, but that's kind of why we realized like, okay, there's no need to go for massive high numbers of players here if we can just get like a few people to give us feedback, because that's also something to keep in mind of like the amount of people who downloaded or played the game in browser versus then the amount of people who actually wrote like their feedback. There is also a funnel there. I think only about half of the people who actually played the game also gave us feedback, which is another thing. I think we still had more than enough data. And I think that's good. So let's talk a bit about the kinds of feedback that we got, because I think that's an interesting thing. When you're doing a playtest, you're going to get like 3 kinds of feedback is how I categorize this. The first thing is like the predicted feedback. These are things that you kind of know as a developer, but it's also like, yeah, if you want to keep working on this and then just putting it out there, we're never gonna get to this playtest. Like we knew that the game kind of had whack balancing. We knew that the game felt very overwhelming at the start because you're getting all of these data and all of these numbers thrown at you and it's like, I don't know what to do with this. We knew that, but we also knew that we couldn't possibly like correctly balance the game without getting other players' feedback about how exactly the game pace felt for them. So we're like, okay, we know that these comments are gonna be coming. Also, like you may know about certain bugs, like, oh, we knew that their tooltips were kind of fucky-wucky, I would say. So we knew that kind of feedback as well. I guess the main problem with like not solving all of the predicted feedback, especially if it's like big obvious things, is that it may take away from the other feedback that you're actually looking for, because the predicted feedback is kind of not really the feedback you're looking for. But if it's like the one glaring thing that everyone comments on, there's only so many pieces of feedback that each individual player will give. Let's say like you get 5 pieces of feedback per player. If all like 10 people who play your game give the exact same predicted feedback first, which takes up like 3 out of the 5 feedbacks that they give, then immediately it gives you less time or like less amount of data for the surprising feedback, the thing that you maybe didn't know about. So those are things like the few weird bugs that we personally never ran into before. Or the other stuff that kind of was like, I think very eye-opening for us, where people are like, hey, this is cool, but I have no idea what these terminologies mean. Because once again, I come from a data center background. I have all of the Cisco certificates still. So for me, there's a very clear difference between, oh, what does reprovision servers mean versus deploy server? But if you don't have that IT background, basically, then it kind of is like maybe not that clear. And those are the feedbacks that we're actually looking for. Those are the things that like, oh, I did not even think about this. We can address this problem, no problem, but we just needed to know that that problem kind of exists, because that is the thing. It may sound like, oh, what do you mean? Like everybody will only give 5 pieces of feedback. I think there is definitely a hard cap in terms of like how deep general feedback you will get is from players. And then, you know, the less glaring obvious things that you have basically, the more like nuanced and different the feedback is going to be that you're actually looking for. So that's kind of that weird balance of like, you need to have a good enough version of your playtest still, while also having enough like room for people to find out different things of feedback for you as well. I think some other like surprising pieces of feedback, because it's not just negative stuff, is also how people kept playing the game for longer than we thought. With people, even though the game was kind of broken and like I said, the balance was weird and we had like some issues with our progression system not really working, still playing for 45 minutes, an hour sometimes even. And that's kind of like, you know, that's a good piece of feedback as well. Maybe they don't say like, oh, the game is amazing, but also the fact that it just kept on going instead of simply being like, fuck it, this isn't worth it, is valuable feedback as well. And there's going to be a third kind of feedback as well. And this is often the hard one, and it's kind of the noise feedback. And this is the ones where you have kind of contrarian pieces of feedback. Is I think the biggest one of like, you don't really know what to do with this kind of feedback, or it doesn't really give you anything actionable or quick to do. We had this mainly with our previous playtests as well, where some people would say like, oh, the game is way too fast. And then other people say, oh, the game is way too slow. And that's the feedback that is like really hard to decide, okay, so what do we actually do with this? Sometimes you also need to realize that not every player is going to enjoy your game. That's part of that sample size as well. People may buy your game on Steam or something as well, and turns out it wasn't for them, which is why you do like demos and things like that still. But that was one thing that we need to be careful of, and that's where you as the developer need to also learn to not blindly accept every single piece of feedback, because then you risk making a game that you don't even enjoy anymore. Where we got a lot of feedback, for example, or like not a lot, but like we got some people who are like, yeah, I wish this was a management game, and like a lot more deep, and that inherently goes against what we want to make, a simple incremental game. Those things are, you know, visually, we could use the same UI to make both styles of games, but it wasn't a design decision or like the design goal from us to make this a deep like strategy game or a management game or a tycoon game. No, we wanted to make this a kind of, you know, not like brain dead, but like more simple, casual, incremental game. And that terminology maybe also gave people the idea of, hey, this is actually a way deeper game than we planned for. So that is where you need to figure out what is the right approach here. Do we stick to our guns and what we determine is like the best game design? And do we just kind of ignore that feedback, or do we want to actually do something with it? But don't take every single piece of feedback and immediately implement it, because this is maybe a hot take, but some people also don't really know what they're talking about. We had some very, you know, weird pieces of feedback as well, like, yeah, the game is just not good, make it better. And it's like, what do we do with this? This gives us no actionable points. So those are kind of the ones that you need to be aware of, that you can like actually discard without feeling too bad about it. So why did it go all right instead of amazing? Well, of course, the game was generally perceived pretty well, still had a bunch of issues. I think another problem, like I mentioned before, is that it just took way longer to get into a playtestable state than we had imagined, which cost us a bunch of time as well, going from 1 week to almost 4 weeks in time to get to that first playtest state isn't ideal either. And some of our big core questions, apart from, okay, is this game worth pursuing, yes or no, also weren't really answered. Like, for example, how would you envision the end goal, or like the final motivation for this game to be? That's still something that we are kind of at the drawing board for. And then also, I think a big mistake is that we didn't implement analytics. That kind of, looking back, was a stupid thing, because we're missing kind of like absolute data now. All the data we have is people talking about their experiences, but we don't have like statistics of how long do they play, how much money did they earn, and all of those things. And it leads me into like, what are my top 3 learnings, my top 3 tips if you want to do a playtest as well? And that is, add analytics. We did this for our previous playtests, for our previous games, where we did one for Kyoto Anomaly, where we checked, okay, what are the anomalies that people kept missing? What are the anomalies people kept getting right? How many loops did they get before they ended up quitting the game? We put all of those analytics in there because it was pretty easy to do with Unity Analytics to get that data. We didn't do that here, and I think here that definitely was a missed opportunity to see indeed how long did they play, but also more granular stuff like in the skill tree, what were the upgrades that people would go for the most, which also helps you when you want to like later on balance your game. We're still going to be adding this for future playtests because we are planning to do those, but I think that was a very big missed opportunity that we did here. I think another thing that we should figure out for our next playtest is to find a way to get a less biased audience, which probably means opening up the playtest to more people, trying out some more marketing approaches of that playtest basically, that is not just, hey, me doing a YouTube live stream, finding people who do not know who I am, who do not care about who I am, and letting them give feedback about our game. I think that's also an incredibly valuable thing in terms of getting good, meaningful feedback of where should we go next with this game. And then my last learning, and I guess this is not really something actionable, but it's like, playtests will always suck to a certain degree because you will always get negative feedback about your game. You'll always be like, oh, this isn't good enough yet, this isn't good enough yet. And you're kind of like, yeah, I know that, but the players, you know, kind of don't know that and they don't care once again about that. But it's also so important because even though you're going to get a bunch of people being like, hey, this isn't good about the game, this isn't good about the game, maybe they word it a little bit rudely, let's say, and they don't really mean it as rude as they write it down, it's still feedback. And you need like some time to process it basically, but once you've processed it, trust me, it is way better and it's going to make you feel like, okay, this game now has a reason of being. This game now has people who found this game good, who want to play this game, and it's going to give you more motivation as well to keep wanting to work on your game. For me at least, it has had a massive impact in how much I want to work on the game, because I now know, a month into development, I have that validation of, okay, this game is worth to keep developing for. So that's what we're going to be doing as well. Maybe a little bit of a where to next. What is our goals for Bite Me Games in the studio and MMO98 next? We want to join this game in the Steam Next Fest. The one now in 2 weeks from when this video comes out, basically. Is it kind of a miserable timeline? 100%, I get it. I know there's people writing comments now already of this is a big mistake, but I think you also need to understand that this is our full-time occupation. We need to earn money from making games, and delaying until the next fest in June is not really an option for our studio financially right now. I think we can still get this game into a good state for the Steam Next Fest. This was also a decision we only made after we had done that playtest, where we got that feedback of, okay, these are the big issues right now, but we are confident we can solve these big issues relatively quickly, or, you know, like still like a week of work or something, but we can get this game into a pretty good state for the Steam Next Fest. Like I said, the next Fest, the one in June, is not financially possible for us to make. We cannot bridge that deep of a gap without some serious bonus revenue. So we just do it the other way. We still join the Steam Next Fest. We are going to be losing out on things like content creator coverage for the most part, because generally for that, you would need to start your content creator outreach like now, basically last week already, but the game just isn't in a playable enough state for that right now. I'll be keeping you updated throughout the entire process of this game's development as well, so if that's something you're interested in, be sure to head down below, because we will 100% guaranteed be making a video after the Steam Next Fest talking about all of the numbers and like how it actually went for us, what did we do marketing wise, because we have other stuff planned for as well. But I think right now this game is in a pretty good spot. I think we can make this a good game. Is this going to be the game that's going to make our studio the $1 million studio? I also don't think so either, but I think this is a very good game for us to keep working on, and I am just immensely grateful that I did that playtest, because it's given us so much more feedback. It's given us a reason to keep working on the game, and I'm also just happy with that. So if you played the game, I'll leave a link down below to the playtest as well. I'll probably like upload the latest build that we have that's maybe a little bit better. There's some issues with it still. It's not really meant to be played super deeply yet. It's still very much a playtest and not a demo right now, because that's something as well. Know the difference between those two. So if you want to give it a go, feel free to do so as well. Feedback ideally through Discord. The YouTube comments are kind of hard to filter through and then share with the rest of the team, and then asking like follow-up questions. But yeah, that's kind of just the update. 2026 is going to be the year that we're finally releasing some more games, so I'm excited about that. I hope you are too, because it also means a lot more, you know, insightful videos and interesting videos, hopefully, about the entire process of making games. That's all I had to say. We upload 2 videos here every week, so if that's something you're interested in, once again, you can head down below and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!